What do you do when your family kicks you out and your husband hands you divorce papers? Emily never expected it. One moment, she was living her life as a housewife. The next, her in-laws were kicking her out, and David, her husband, was handing her divorce papers. But in a strange way, it felt like an opportunity, a chance for her to finally take control. Stay tuned to see how Emily turns this situation around, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories. I hate everything about you. Huh? What do you mean? I only live with my own family, so leave right now. To my shock, my in-laws made the decision to kick me out. Even David, my husband, calmly handed me divorce papers. I've already filled out my part. Hurry up and sign the papers. I hadn't expected this, but in a strange way, it felt like an opportunity. My heart was racing, but I signed the divorce papers without hesitation. My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a housewife for 5 years. Married to David, we had no children and had lived alone together for all these years. David had always worked at a company with horrible conditions, long hours, early mornings, late nights. I could see how it wore him down, mentally and physically. It bothered me, so I started looking for ways to help. I found small jobs that I could do from home, like data entry, earning just enough to cover a part-time job's salary. But I didn't stop there. I dove into video editing, learning on my own, slowly building up a steady stream of clients. As I gained experience, I started saving money, and soon after, I began investing. My days were filled with studying, managing investments, and working on video editing projects. The routine wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. I was starting to see the money flow in, especially from the investments. David didn't know how much I was earning, but I could tell he was struggling. One evening, I decided to bring it up. I could cover the rent, I said, trying to ease his burden. You shouldn't have to keep working at that place with such terrible conditions. He blinked at me, confused. No, our finances are fine. You only earn pocket money from your video editing, right? I nodded, but the truth was far from that. Actually, I've been doing well with investments. I have enough to take the load off. You don't need to keep forcing yourself into that job. Nah. David's expression softened, a trace of disbelief flickering across his face. Really? Yes, I'm so grateful for everything you've done. You deserve better than that job. A wave of relief washed over him. He smiled and told me he'd submitted his resignation letter to the company. I felt proud. He had worked so hard, and now things were going to get better. At least, that's what I thought. But that's when everything started to unravel. David was free from the job that drained him, but something shifted. As the days passed, he seemed distant. The spark in our marriage that had once been so bright slowly faded, replaced by silence and tension. I didn't understand it at first. He seemed to resent me, even though I had helped him make the decision to leave. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The more I tried to reach out, the more he pulled away. And that's when I realized the changes I'd made helping with finances, trying to ease his burden, had only pushed us further apart. The truth was, I had thought I was doing what was best for us. But David didn't need a partner to take control. He needed someone to share the load with him, not do everything for him. I had changed our lives, but I hadn't realized the impact it would have on our relationship. The road ahead didn't seem as clear anymore. Hey, can we move in with my parents? Huh? Well, wait a minute. Do you mean that we're moving to your parents' house? You know that even if you change jobs with my earnings, we can totally live like this together, so there's no need for us to go all the way to your parents' house. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is we can rent a room in the new condo and we are all going to live together. Huh? Take a look at this. With that, David brought a flyer for a recently built tower condo. Are you perhaps thinking of living there? I'm finally able to take good care of my parents by doing this. No, now wait a minute. The rent is $5,000. That's too expensive. But you're earning money through investments, right? You can afford it easily. But... It was certainly not impossible, but it's not like I was dying to live life like a rich person, and I wanted to save up for our child in the future, if I ever had one. Besides, I didn't expect to live with my parents-in-law, and it will only be normal for David to use the money he earned to take care of his own parents. I was a bit disappointed because I felt like he was using me for his own convenience. Do we really have to live with your parents-in-law? What? You don't want to? Well, they were still in good health, right? Even George has a couple of years left before he retires. I've been working so hard at the terrible company that I haven't been able to give much attention to them. Please, please help out for me. David had asked me to do so, and I reluctantly agreed. But as I had expected, this would turn out to be the biggest, baddest choice of my life. Wow, what an amazing place! The scenery is amazing and beautiful. I'm glad that you both are happy about this place. My parents, even though, are overjoyed with their new life in the tower condo. They were very excited the whole day when they first moved in. I am so proud of you, David. You must be making so much money to be able to afford such a luxurious lifestyle. Yeah, I was right beside my husband and poked him with my elbow. David awkwardly told them about the rent for this room is not paid from his earnings. Hearing that, both in-laws had the face. Actually, Anne is the one who is earning the money from investments, and from her earnings we're paying the rent. What? So it's not from your earnings, David? Oh, it's Emily's earnings. My in-laws were shocked when they heard the truth, but I was relieved David told them now rather than later, instead of letting them find out through lies. At first, they were apologetic, especially to me, and I felt like I was making them uncomfortable too. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty for that, so I told David to reassure them not to worry too much. I had originally started this to help him out with the struggles he was facing at work. I thought it would be good for my in-laws to live more freely, which would in turn make David happy too. But my in-laws weren't satisfied with that. After David talked to them, they grew bolder and more demanding. I actually like my pasta softer, and don't forget the beer. Oh, and I need mayonnaise too. I want this brand bag. Can you buy it for me, Emily? And a golf club too. It felt like they saw me as nothing more than a money machine, someone who could earn a lot for them and be at their service. I wasn't about to let that happen. Well, I said, keeping my tone firm, I'll do my best with housework, but I can't do everything. I want to be a good wife and take care of the chores as best as I can, but we need to be strict with money. If we're not, they'll just become spoiled, and I refuse to spoil my in-laws. I stuck to my decision, but my in-laws weren't pleased. They grew grumpy with me and started complaining to David about how unreasonable I was. Why is she always at home? She says she makes a lot of money, but I doubt it. I bet she's just gambling. I can't believe she has the nerve to show her face when she's just been lucky, pretending like she's all that. It seemed that's what they'd been saying to David behind my back. Meanwhile, David had changed jobs, opting for one that paid less but didn't require overtime. He no longer had to pay for rent or living expenses, so he could spend his entire salary freely. His clothes became more extravagant tailor-made suits, brand shoes, designer bags. David, who had always loved fashion, was thrilled to be able to indulge himself. Since David was living so freely, my parents-in-law began to complain to him about why they couldn't live the same way or afford the luxury items he was buying. And of course, David turned to me, telling me I should go buy things for them as part of taking care of them. But I refused. If you want to take care of them, why don't you do it? You've been using your salary freely, so you should be able to spend it on them. It's a good chance to show how much you care. David frowned at my response. He didn't argue because what I said was true. But if we started buying all sorts of things for his parents, he wouldn't be able to afford his own luxuries anymore. So he asked me to take care of them. But since I refused, David started to become more and more harsh with me. You've been sitting in front of the computer all the time. You're done as a woman if you don't even wear makeup anymore. You think it doesn't matter since you're at home all the time, but if you keep dressing like this, we won't match anymore. Wait a minute, I retorted. What do you mean we won't match? We're always at home, so what does matching even matter? That's how women like you get uglier and uglier. You should always strive to be beautiful. David began to insult me every chance he got. And my in-laws, they noticed and joined in. Why can't you cook better? You may be able to make money, but you're no good as a wife. If you can't handle the chores, then at least do your job as a wife properly. Both my in-laws started to pile on the criticism, and honestly, I was fed up. So, I started to speak up for myself. But it is thanks to me and my earnings that you're all able to live like this now. I think that is the most important thing. I mean, Linda, you're physically healthy and also not working, but you don't do any housework, right? And George, you quit your job, right? What would happen to you if I'm gone? I'm not asking you to respect me or anything, but I don't deserve to be complained to like this. When I said this, my in-laws were shaking, with their faces turning red and unable to say anything. What I said was completely right. After that, my in-laws started talking behind my back to David whenever I wasn't around. Their voices were loud enough for me to overhear, especially when they gathered in the living room. Who does she think she is? That woman! She makes fun of us all the time, and it really pisses me off. Even the other day, she was saying things to us like she was mocking us. She's changed. She got cocky just because she made money from gambling. So, if she can make that much money, then we should be able to make a lot too if we study a little and start trading FX, right? Yeah, exactly. She did it, so we can do it too. We should start now. I couldn't believe my ears. Investing and gambling are two entirely different things. It's not something that can be learned in a day or by just studying a little bit. George and David, who both worked in companies, should have known better. From that point on, both my in-laws and my husband became extremely competitive with me. Even during breakfast, they'd say, "I need to check the stock prices. I have to check it before anyone else does." And then they'd pull out their laptops right on the dining table to start checking. I began to feel like an outsider in my own family. If they were going to hustle against me like this, I didn't belong there. But amidst all of this, I was about to uncover an unexpected, shocking truth. It happened one day when I took a break and went out with a friend. I had heard there was an event for my favorite anime, so I decided to get away from work for a while. As I was walking down the street, I happened to spot my husband in front of a brand store. He had just come out, carrying another branded item. Again, he should have been investing the money, not buying luxury goods. I stood there staring at him, thinking this to myself, when suddenly a young woman appeared from behind him. She wrapped her arms around him. My heart dropped. Panic surged through me. I ducked into the shadows with my friend, quickly pulling out my phone to take photos. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I knew things weren't great between David and me, but I never imagined it would be this bad. I had always believed, despite our issues, that he loved me as his wife. But I was wrong. David wasn't just neglecting me, he was having an intimate relationship with another woman. Not with me, but with her. It felt like something inside me broke. The thought of being with a man like that, of living with his parents, someone who treated me like this, was unbearable. From that day on, I started looking for my own apartment, a place where I could live for myself. I stopped caring for my in-laws. I stopped doing any housework. Why should I? They had never appreciated me, and now, with everything I had learned, I was done. My in-laws were furious. David was furious. Then, one day, they summoned me. "What with your attitude lately? Every single thing you do or say makes me angry. You were too cocky for a wife. Mom and Dad are right. You're getting a little carried away." And Linda started to raise her voice. "I hate everything about you." "Huh? What do you mean? I only live with my own family, so leave right now." To my surprise, my in-laws decided to kick me out. My husband, David, had even politely prepared divorce papers for me to sign. "I've already filled out my part. Hurry up and sign the papers. It was something I didn't wish for, but it was an opportunity for me. I signed the divorce papers as soon as I received them." "Well done. Just get up quickly, okay?" I said as I began to pack my bags. "Now this house will finally be ours. Now she's out of the way, let's have some expensive dinner to celebrate." The in-laws started to talk in a loud voice again so that I could hear them. I packed my bags without a care in the world. For now, I will take only what I need. I'll call the conductor to pick up the rest of my belongings on another day. As I said this, my in-laws looked at me with a victorious look on their faces and laughed and said, "Do it as fast as you can!" It's very strange how people can be so smug when you think about it calmly. It's them who would be the one losing. I'm thinking I guess they're just stupid. Well, anyways, I will prepare and get ready to show them what hell is. I went back to my parents' house for the time being. Then, I went with the conductor to the tower condo and had the rest of my stuff hauled away. "So now this room is completely ours," David says with a huge grin on his face. I said, "Oh, by the way, we haven't finished talking about divorce yet." and I put the evidence of David's affair in front of him that I had received from the detective agency. Oh, no. David was completely mortified by the photographic evidence of his own affair. We will get a divorce, but after I get the proper alimony for what you've done. My parents-in-law had no idea that their own son was having an affair, and their faces were pale. No, no way! How come you know about my affair? You just thought that you wouldn't get caught because I was always home? You weren't an idiot for walking around town with her arms around you confidently. Let's talk about the rest through our lawyers. My in-laws interrupted me when I said that. David, ignore what this woman says because we have a shot of getting back at her. You're right. What did she mean by having a shot of getting back at me? Then David says something that surprised me. If I invest about $50,000 in margin trading, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars all at once. You are in big trouble if you gamble like that. I was about to advise them, but decided not to because you make mistakes. You gain knowledge and practical ways to invest. It will be expensive, but a good way to learn for David and his parents. I hope it all goes well. I said this and headed for the front door to leave the house. They all went out of their way to follow me and said, "Now I want to be disrespected by you, and I'll be more successful than you." I ignored them and went straight out of the house and back to my parents' house. Later, through my lawyer, I filed a claim for alimony against my husband and his mistress. I made it clear that David was to blame, and there would be no division of property. According to my lawyer, they looked like they could afford it, and to my surprise, they agreed to pay me the alimony in full, with no arguments about property. Maybe they had just closed a successful merchant deal, I thought. But apparently, they hadn't, and instead planned to settle the alimony first before doing so. For my part, I was grateful I didn't have to pay them a dime. The alimony came through quickly, and I decided to invest the money. Thanks to my wise investments, I was able to earn even more and save up again. I moved into a simple apartment, no need for a fancy tower condo. It was just a regular place, but it was mine, and it was all I needed. From that point on, I spent my days living freely, just as I wanted. Then, out of nowhere, my ex-husband contacted me. Thinking I had forgotten to block his number, I reluctantly answered. Hello? And help me. What happened? I screwed up big time with immersion trading. I'm $50,000 in debt. I'm completely sunk. Oh, what a disaster. How did you manage to gamble like this, especially after all those years of winning? He sighed. For the record, it wasn't gambling. I studied it properly, made calculations, predictions. I invested smartly. You can't just invest like you're playing the lottery and expect to win. Unbelievable! And now, please, please come back. If this continues, we're going to lose the contract for the $5,000 tower condo. That's the best outcome, don't you think? You know, because you can't afford it on your earnings. My parents aren't convinced, and they're going to pressure me to do another round of merchant trading. Oh dear, you better stop them. But that's no longer my concern. It's your job to deal with your parents now. Goodbye. Hey, he called, but I had already hung up. Later, our mutual friend told me that David's parents, despite his pleas, went ahead with another round of merchant trading. It failed again, adding another $30,000 in debt. And of course, their beloved tower condo was rented under David's name. This wasn't a win for me at all. David and his family were now buried in debt, with David pouring all his income into repaying it. His mistress, unsurprisingly, abandoned him. He had to work from morning till night, living the same miserable life he had before. His parents? They were also working non-stop to pay off their debts. It was exactly what they deserved, and I had zero sympathy for them. At the end of it all, they finally understood the reality of investments. Too bad it didn't matter anymore. They wouldn't have the resources to invest again in the future. On the other hand, I continued to make money through investments. I had earned enough that I no longer needed to work. From now on, I planned to focus on my hobbies and enjoy a comfortable, semi-retired life. It made me wonder, why do men always look down on their wives, thinking they're more capable than we are? It seems to me that supporting a wife who knows how to make money would lead to a much happier marriage. But David? He was just another man who cheated on his wife, an idiot who couldn't control himself. I'm so glad I left him. I hope he regrets everything and that I can enjoy my own life in peace and retirement. What do you do when the person you loved, the one you thought you could count on, turns out to be the very one dragging you down? When the same person who was supposed to be your partner in life becomes a burden, using you and then betraying you? Emily spent years believing that by helping her husband, David, she was doing the right thing. She worked hard, built a career, and even covered their expenses so he could leave his toxic job. But in return, all she got was resentment, distance, and eventually, betrayal. The turning point came when David, instead of being grateful, asked her to continue supporting his parents while he indulged in luxuries on her dime. The final straw came when Emily discovered David's affair. That moment shattered the illusion of their marriage, but instead of wallowing in despair, Emily took action. She walked away, filed for alimony, and built a life for herself. Now, she's thriving, using the money she earned wisely and living life on her terms. But what about David and his family? They're drowning in debt, forced to face the consequences of their actions. David is left struggling in the same miserable job, while his parents, who had relied on Emily's generosity, are now paying the price. So, what do you think? If you were in Emily's shoes, would you have stayed or walked away sooner? Do you believe it's possible to build a healthy relationship where both partners truly support each other? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
Pregnant again? How utterly disappointing. Marla's words sliced through the tense silence like a butcher's knife. My stomach dropped as I slowly looked up from my plate at my mother-in-law's sneering face. Evan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but stayed silent as usual. Marla continued, her voice dripping with disdain. Another daughter, I assume? When are you going to give my son the heir he deserves? I felt the blood drain from my face as the weight of her words slammed into me. This was supposed to be a joyful celebration dinner for my pregnancy, but Marla had once again managed to turn it into a humiliation. Mother, please, Evan finally muttered, but she waved him off dismissively. Don't mother me. You're just as frustratingly submissive as your father was. If you don't control your wife, she'll keep popping out these disappointing female placeholders. Tears stung my eyes as I finally found my voice. Zoe is not a placeholder. She's our beloved daughter, and this pregnancy is still early. We don't know the sex yet. Oh, spare me. Marla rolled her eyes. With your atrocious track record, it's clearly another girl. You're a broodmare failure. The venom in her tone shook me to my core. Evan's head hung low, crushed by his mother's verbal lashing. Hurt and rage burned inside me, but I knew defending myself was futile against this woman's cruelty. I need some air, I managed to choke out, pushing back from the table. I had to escape before breaking down completely. Marla scoffed as I rushed away. Running away again, are we? Typical. I hurried out to the back patio, gulping in the cool night air as burning tears streaked my cheeks. How could she be so hateful and demeaning toward me? Footsteps approached, and I tensed, steeling myself for another barrage of insults. But it was Evan, his face etched with sadness and apologetic. Lena, I'm so sorry, she was completely out of line back there, he said softly, taking my hand. You know how important you and the kids are to me. Don't listen to her vitriol. I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry at his passivity. But I did listen, Evan. For 8 years, I've listened to her constant put-downs and cruelty toward me, toward Zoe. When are you finally going to stand up to your mother? Evan's eyes widened, then quickly averted. You know how she is. She'll never change, he mumbled weakly. I felt something inside me harden at his words. For the first time, I truly saw Evan's inability, or unwillingness, to protect me from his mother's abuse. In that moment, the illusion of our marriage began cracking before my eyes. As I looked into my husband's beaten, submissive stance, I realized with sinking dread that this pattern would never end. Marla's iron grip over him was unbreakable, and I was the perpetual target for her destructive need to dominate. Warily, I turned and headed back inside, leaving Evan standing alone with his spineless excuses. I sensed this was the beginning of an inescapable downward spiral that would alter my family forever. If only I knew then just how devastating the consequences would be. The tension hung thick in the air as Marla smoothed her silk blouse, a self-satisfied smirk playing across her lips. Lena dear, I have some news that may shake things up a bit. I eyed her warily from across the kitchen counter. What are you talking about? Well, you know how concerned I've been about securing a legitimate heir for my son, she began in a mock sympathetic tone. A daughter is lovely, but it simply won't do for carrying on the family legacy. Rage simmered within me, but I bit my tongue. After the disastrous dinner weeks ago, I knew any protest would be futile against this woman's twisted agenda. Marla continued, so I took matters into my own hands to help solve this delicate issue. I introduced Evan to a wonderful young lady, Sienna. She's fertile, devoted, and more than capable of providing him with the son he deserves. The words hung in the air like a bad dream. But Marla's vindictive stare told me this was no nightmare. It was disgustingly real. You brought another woman into our marriage to have a baby with my husband? I sputtered, struggling to process this depths of her depravity. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. I'm doing what's best for my son's future. You've proven quite incapable in that regard. The casual cruelty of her words struck me like physical blows. How could anyone be so utterly lacking in human empathy? You cruel, manipulative hag, I cried out, unable to contain my anger any longer. Does Evan even know about this vile scheme? A slow, satisfied smile spread across Marla's face. Why don't you ask him yourself, dear? On cue, Evan stepped into the room, flanked by a slim, overly made-up woman I didn't recognize. Sienna, I presumed. The look of sheepish contrition on my husband's face said it all. You allowed this? Your own mother brought another woman into our marriage to bear your child? I stammered, feeling the world crumbling around me. Evan couldn't meet my eyes. Lena, we've talked about how important carrying on the family line is. So you're just going to let your mother pimp out some cheap whore to get what she wants? I screamed, uncaring of the foul language as blinding rage took over. Sienna's eyebrows shot up in feigned indignation. Evan finally looked at me, his expression hardening to match his mother's callous demeanor. This is for the greater good, Lena. My duty as a man. If you were able to do your wifely duties properly, we wouldn't need to go to such extremes. His cold, rehearsed words lanced through my heart like daggers. This was really happening. My own husband was utterly betraying me in the most humiliating way possible, all with his mother's enthusiastic support. Marla chuckled at my stunned silence. Don't worry, dear. Once Sienna properly breeds, you can focus your energy on my granddaughter. We wouldn't want you feeling completely useless. Her words ignited an indescribable fury within me that I never knew I possessed. With a primal scream, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy ceramic vase, and hurled it with every ounce of strength. It struck Marla squarely in her smug face, shattering viciously and spraying blood and ceramic shards across the room. Sienna shrieked in horror as Marla crumpled to the floor, clutching her ruined face and howling in agony. Chest heaving, I turned to Evan, seeing the shock and fear in his eyes. In that unrestrained moment, I knew my marriage had disintegrated into ashes. There would be no forgiving this ultimate betrayal. Marla's monstrous machinations had cut straight through the very core of my world. The only thing left was vengeance. The eerie silence hung heavy in the air as Marla's wails finally subsided. I stood motionless, fists clenched, glaring at the crumpled, bleeding form of my monstrous mother-in-law on the kitchen floor. Evan stared at me with a mixture of shock and fear. Beside him, Sienna shrank back, clearly shaken by my outburst, but still clinging to her role in this sick charade. You crazy bitch! Marla's trembling voice finally broke the tension, thick with a combination of pain and rage. I'll see you arrested for this. Assaulting me in my own home. Your home? I scoffed, unable to contain the sudden resurgence of fury rippling through me. This is my home, the home I made with my husband, the man you're trying to pimp out behind my back like some kind of degenerate mother-pimping monster. Marla opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a raised hand. No, don't even try denying it, you hateful crone. I heard everything, how you willingly brought this woman into my marriage explicitly to cuckold your own son. I turned my fiery glare to Evan, who flinched as if struck. And you spineless coward, going along with your mother's demented plans, ready to stick your dick into the first fertile womb she picks for you. Lena, he began weakly, but I wasn't about to let him make pathetic excuses. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just be a good little wifey while you knocked up some cheap hussy on the side? Hey! Sienna's shrill voice cut in, her fake-baked face contorting with indignation. I am not some hussy! Your bastard husband came on to me! I whirled on the overly made-up woman, feeling a cruel smile spread across my face. Did he now? So tell me, when you were spreading your legs for a very married man, did you stop to think about his innocent family you were helping to destroy? Sienna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Deep down, even she realized how reprehensible her role was in this sordid scheme. Chuckling darkly, I turned back to Evan. Unfreaking believable. I gave you everything. A beautiful child, a loving home, an amazing life, and you were ready to just throw it all away to satisfy your mother's unhinged breeding fetish. Marla stirred, glaring up at me, her face already starting to grotesquely swell from the vase impact. You have no one to blame but yourself, you infertile. Enough, I roared, slamming my fist down on the counter, hard enough to make them all jump. I have had it with your bottomless well of cruelty and manipulation. If having a son is so obsessively important, then Evan is welcome to it. Striding over to a small desk, I snatched up a pen and a sheaf of papers, thrusting them toward Evan with cheeks burning. Separation agreement. You can have your son's situation, your freedom to breed some new little heirs with that plastic surgery disaster over there. Evan gaped, stunned into silence. Even Sienna seemed jolted by my actions as the gravity of the situation sank in. Well? I demanded through gritted teeth. Sign it and get out! Take your vile, treacherous mother and your stupid son quest and just go. I want you out of my house, out of my life. Slowly, numbly, Evan took the pen and stared at the agreement. A heavy pause seemed to blanket the room as Marla and Sienna looked on with matching expressions, a mixture of surprise and sickening satisfaction. Then, with a trembling hand, Evan scrawled his name in harsh strokes across the papers, officially ending our marriage in that single callous gesture, as his mother had always intended. Exhaling hard, I snatched the signed pages back from his hand, our eyes locking in one last, searingly intense glare. Then I turned and walked upstairs without another word, clutching the proof of my broken world and wondering how I would ever be able to piece my shattered life back together. The next few days passed in a numb blur. Evan and his mother had stormed out after the confrontation, taking their co-conspirator Sienna with them. An eerie silence descended over the house I once thought of as my loving home. I drifted aimlessly, my mind struggling to process the devastating implosion of my marriage. Logically, I knew signing those separation papers was the only recourse after Evan's unforgivable betrayal. And yet, the overwhelming sense of loss threatened to swallow me whole at times. Zoe, our 8-year-old daughter, seemed to pick up on the heavy tension despite my efforts to shield her. She became quieter, clingier, her usual bright exuberance dimming. "Mommy, where did Daddy go?" she asked one evening as we picked at our dinner in silence. I froze, unprepared for the question. Part of me wanted to proclaim the ugly truth, that her father had abandoned us to chase some atavistic need to breed an heir with another woman. But I couldn't bring myself to shatter her innocence so completely. "Daddy had to go away for a little while, honey," I hedged, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Work things." Zoe frowned, clearly picking up on my emotional disquiet. Ever the empath, just like her mother. "Are you sad, Mommy? Did you and Daddy have a fight?" "Something like that, baby," I managed, fighting back the lump swelling in my throat. "But everything will be okay, I promise." The lie tasted like ashes on my tongue, because in that moment there was no way to see how anything could ever be okay again. A sharp knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. Zoe looked up, eyes wide with something like hope. "Is that Daddy?" "Stay here, sweetie," I said quickly, rising to answer the door with trepidation curling in my stomach. But it wasn't Evan on the other side. Instead, a sharply dressed man in an expensive suit stood with a crisp folder in his hands. "Mrs. Redding?" he asked brusquely without preamble. "I'm Mr. Collins, an associate of your husband's." An icy fist gripped my heart as I suddenly sensed where this was headed. The separation had clearly begun the legal fractures. "My firm has prepared these documents for you to review and sign," Mr. Collins continued, all business as he held out the folder. Hesitantly, I accepted the hefty stack of papers, dread settling like a cold stone in my gut. This was really happening, the death knell of my marriage after Evan's sickening betrayal. As I mechanically paged through the legalese, certain phrases jumped out in harsh simplicity. Petition for dissolution of marriage, rendered the covenant irreparably broken, division of assets favoring the male issue-bearing party. I felt the blood drain from my face as awful realization bloomed. This wasn't just a simple divorce agreement. It was Evan and his demonic mother wielding their wealth and influence to strip me of everything, my home, my life, my child, all in cruel pursuit of their deranged male heir vendetta. You have 48 hours to review and sign these terms, Mrs. Redding, Mr. Collins stated flatly. After that, my client will pursue more aggressive recourse if you fail to comply. The unmistakable threat laced his words like arsenic. Memories flashed of the unrestrained violence that ran in Marla's virulent veins, the vase, the bloodshed, of her unstoppable quest to destroy any obstacle to the grandchild she craved. My treacherous, spineless husband had clearly thrown in with his vile mother. He would stop at nothing to cut me out of his life completely, all for the unforgivable sin of bearing him a daughter instead of a son. A cold, dead feeling settled over me, the final vestige of our broken marriage crumbling to bitter ash. There would be no more tears, no more desperate pleas or self-delusions. I was truly and utterly alone now, except for my innocent little girl watching in sad confusion from the next room, the pure, bright spirit that was supposed to be my greatest joy. But in that stark moment she became my sole lifeline, my unbreakable reason to endure the coming storm. I turned to Mr. Collins, my jaw rigid. Tell your client that after 48 hours he can expect to hear from my attorney, I stated in a toneless rasp, because I'll be damned if I let him take my daughter too. With that, I shut the door in the lawyer's face. Then I turned and pulled a confused Zoe into my arms, holding her tiny form as if she were a life vest in a raging sea. There would be no surrender, no matter how viciously Evan and Marla tried to drown me. For Zoe's sake, I would find a way to stay afloat and make them pay dearly for their twisted sins. The next 48 hours were a blur of grim determination. I knew time was short before Evan and Marla would attempt to strip me of everything I held dear. First, I secured a shark of a divorce attorney, Caroline Weston. Steely, aggressive, and with a reputation for devouring entitled rich husbands like Evan. This is one of the most blatant, unethical cases of alienation of affection I've ever seen, Caroline stated in a cold fury after I recounted the sordid details. We're going to crucify this bastard and his Medea of a mother. Her words kindled a flame of hope that I could indeed survive this nightmare with my daughter and some shreds of dignity intact. Next was gathering ammunition, any proof of Evan's misdeeds that could be leveraged in the coming war. I pored over financial records, discovering his company had been filtering money to an offshore account for years. Embezzlement and tax evasion, potentially criminal behavior if exposed. Perfect leverage. Finally, I arranged for Zoe's temporary relocation while the legal battle raged. My sister Nina, an elementary school teacher, lived 2 states over. I knew she could shelter and care for my sweet girl while I fought in the trenches. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, I was ready, or as ready as I could be. Mr. Collins arrived promptly with the same aloof disdain as before. I trust you've had ample time to review the terms and come to an amenable decision, he stated flatly. In response, I slid the signed divorce petition across the table, but not the one he provided. The stack of papers bore Caroline Weston's imprimatur, every word thoroughly negotiated for maximum impact. Mr. Collins' eyes flashed with surprise as he scanned the unrecognized document, his brows knitting in disapproval. This was not the agreement we discussed. My client will need to reevaluate these terms. These are the terms, I stated coldly. I refuse to be bullied or stonewalled. Every nefarious act, every awful betrayal has consequences. I slid the thick dossier of financial documentation across the table, watching Mr. Collins's face blanch slightly as he grasped the implications. Your client's illegal corporate dealings have been rigorously catalogued by very credible forensic accountants, I added with a hint of vindictive satisfaction. Any attempt to deprive me of my legal marital rights and claim over my daughter will be met with the full public revelation of these damning records. I allowed that threat to hang in the air. Evan's ego and insecurity about his business reputation were thinly veiled weak spots, traits his vile mother had eagerly exploited countless times. Now it was my turn to wield that leverage. Mr. Collins maintained an impressively impassive poker face as he studied the documentation, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in his jaw. Perhaps he was already calculating how hard this battle could hit Evan's pocketbook. "I will present this counteroffer to Mr. Redding in full," he said finally, voice tight, "contingent on these materials remaining discreet for now." "See that you do," I said simply. "The meter is running on flaying his reputation and criminal liability wide open." With a curt nod, Mr. Collins collected the documents and departed, clearly reeling from this unanticipated turn of events. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest spark of hope, of reclaiming some portion of my life and dignity from Evan and Marla's grasping claws. But there was still one vital loose end to secure before the war began in earnest. I turned and gathered Zoe into my arms, fighting back fresh tears at her sad, bewildered expression. "Mommy," she said tremulously, "what's happening? I want Daddy to come home." I hushed her gently, stroking her soft hair. "I know, baby, I know. But you have to go stay with Auntie Nina for a little while, okay? For your safety." Zoe's eyes widened slightly, picking up on the undercurrent of tension. But she nodded obediently. As I clutched her tiny form, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect my daughter's well-being, even inscribing her name permanently in the chasm dividing our family. There would be hurt and confusion, but I hoped she would eventually understand. Because in the end, I would make absolutely certain that Evan and Marla paid the ultimate price for their monstrous transgressions. Once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The divorce battle erupted with a fury I could scarcely have imagined. Evan and Marla clearly felt spurned by my refusal to capitulate, and were determined to crush me through overwhelming legal force and intimidation. Caroline proved to be worth every penny, matching their team's viciousness tit for tat. Accusations and exposures flew in both directions as dark secrets were mercilessly excavated. Marla launched a public smear campaign, portraying me as an unfit mother and spouse jealous of Evan's business success. We countered by leaking details of her deranged campaign to cuckold her own son for a male heir. It was a brutal, soul-destroying process. But I refused to surrender an inch, kept afloat by my determination to maintain stability for Zoe. Finally, after 6 excruciating months, cooler heads in Evan's camp prevailed in pushing for a negotiated settlement, an end to the scorched earth hostilities before any more radioactive scandals fully combusted. I'll never forget the heavy silence that fell over the sterile conference room as our respective legal teams arrived. Evan entered, shoulders squared but eyes hollowed by the long battle. Then Marla swept in, her face still bearing the faintest scars from the vase incident, twisted into her trademark sneer. I felt a brief thrill of satisfaction that at least I'd managed to mar her unbearably smug exterior. Greetings were dispensed with, having long abandoned such niceties. We came straight to business. My client is prepared to offer a full and impartial distribution of legitimate marital assets, provided certain conditions are met, Caroline stated firmly, including permanent renunciation of custodial claims over the minor child. I could feel Marla's glare burning a hole through me. Sacrificing any claim to Zoe was the heaviest concession, but a necessary one to secure safety and healing. To her credit, Caroline didn't flinch, as well as assurances that the unconventional reproductive circumstances during the marriage remained sealed and undisclosed. A harsh jab at the twisted heir conspiracy, and a not-so-veiled threat about potential criminal repercussions. Evan shifted uncomfortably at the allusion. Marla's scowl deepened. "While such terms are highly irregular," their lead counsel replied stiffly, "we are amenable to the equity distribution, provided indemnity against future potential actions." A ugly pause lingered. They knew their financial skullduggery had been thoroughly exposed and could jeopardize not just Evan's business, but potential imprisonment. So they had no choice but to negotiate a suppression of the whole sordid truth. The tables had finally turned in my favor. "Of course, so long as commitments are adhered to, the matters will remain permanently sealed," Caroline stated, her shark-like smile just a touch too wide. The negotiation continued for hours. splitting immense assets and investments down to the finest decimal point. But in the end, we hammered out an agreement, secured by both sides the mutual sustaining silence. Marla looked utterly miserable, faced with irrevocably surrendering control over her son's life and Zoe's. While still obscenely wealthy, I knew the concessions represented a profound personal defeat, which fueled my resolve. "I don't expect congratulations," Caroline told me in an undertone as the final paperwork was prepared. "This whole situation is equal parts sickening and infuriating, but you stood your ground and secured the best path for your daughter's well-being." I could only nod numbly, my strength finally waning after the marathon ordeal. There was no jubilation or catharsis, only the cold satisfaction of having survived this battle, of inflicting some semblance of consequences on Evan and Marla for their grotesque transgressions, and ensuring a future of stability for Zoe. Sliding the notarized agreement across the desk, I met Marla's seething glare one last time. "Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, you twisted, evil bitch!" Too weary even to revel in her impotent sputtering at the insult, I simply stood and walked out, gathering the last remnants of my dignity to forge a path into this new, uncertain life. There was still one final loose end to tie up, and I intended to cut Marla's last thread of delusion with utmost precision. With the divorce settlement finalized and my financial future secured, I could finally turn my focus to rebuilding my life, our life, free from Evan and Marla's toxic orbit. My first priority was reintegrating with Zoe. The poor girl had been shuttled between relatives for months, kept at a cautious distance from the legal war zone raging between her parents. I could only imagine the confusion and hurt she must have felt. When Nina brought her home that first day, Zoe ran straight into my arms, her little body trembling with soft sobs. My heart shattered anew at her muffled cries. "I missed you so much, Mommy. I was so scared." "Shh, I know, baby," I soothed, fighting my own tears. "I missed you more than you could ever know, but it's okay now. We're going to be okay." She pulled back, her young face still so innocent yet bearing a new heaviness. "Is Daddy ever coming home?" A lump formed in my throat as I studied her deep brown eyes, so much like Evan's. How could I lie, yet also deprive her of hope? "Daddy can't be with us anymore, sweetheart," I managed carefully. "He made some choices that went against what we believe is right." Zoe's brow furrowed in confusion. "Did he do something bad?" "In a way, yes." I sighed, pulling her close again. "But you don't have to worry about any of that now. What matters is you and me and how we move forward from here, okay?" She nodded, seeming to grasp the simplicity of that concept, despite the complexities raging underneath. In that moment, I vowed to preserve her innocence, her trust, in whatever way I could. Over the following weeks, we began to rebuild our little family of two. With Evan's financial settlement, I was able to secure a fresh start, a cozy rental home away from the shattered remnants of our marriage, enroll Zoe in a new school, and realign my career trajectory in marketing communications. Slowly, smiles and warmth began returning to Zoe's youthful exuberance as our new normal solidified, no longer weighed down by that toxic undercurrent of dysfunction surrounding Evan and Marla. The only hiccup came when I received a terse communication from Sienna, Evan's former mistress, the woman he had intended to breed his heir with. "Your pathetic excuse for a husband came crawling back, in case you were wondering," her message read acidly. "But once I got a taste of his true self and that monster-in-law, I wanted no part of that dysfunctional freak show." She included documentation showing the exorbitant settlement she had demanded to preserve her silence and disappear from our lives for good. A final insult to injury, paid from my share of the divorce payout. Rather than anger, I felt only pity for Sienna's sad delusion that she'd been anything more than a dispensable pawn in Evan and Marla's twisted schemes, and I sensed her message held far more impact for them than for me. The ultimate failure and rejection of their disastrous heir-breeding plot. In a strange way, it felt like the last fading embers of that ugliness had finally burnt out completely, freeing me to turn my energy fully toward nurturing and protecting the family I did have, my ethereal bond with Zoe. There were still the occasional flare-ups from Marla's camp, grotesque tantrums lamenting her loss of control and grandchild, but I simply systemized blocking and containing her, preserving peace for Zoe at all costs. A few months after the finalized settlement, I received an awkward, rambling text from Evan out of the blue. I know I have no right to darken your life any longer. The wreckage left behind is entirely my shame to bear. But I hope one day Zoe will understand that, despite everything, I did love her with all my heart. The words were a hollow echo, a desperate grasp for validation or absolution after his spinelessness shattered our family. I didn't bother responding, focused entirely on my new beginning, because that broken man's sad plea for sympathy couldn't reach me any longer. Not in the sanctuary of tranquility and love I had rebuilt around my beautiful daughter. Not when his vile deeds had finally caught up to him, leaving him utterly alone with his unbearable guilt. The years passed with surprising tranquility as I raised Zoe in our new peaceful life. There were moments of struggle and heartache, of course, but they paled in comparison to the constant toxicity that pervaded my marriage to Evan. As she grew into a brilliant, self-assured young woman, I made sure Zoe understood the basic truths of what tore our family apart, at least enough for her to recognize the inherent brokenness in her father and grandmother's value system. She never voiced resentment toward them, but a sort of detached pity. An intrinsic understanding of how their obsessive pursuit of an heir destroyed any possible bond. "I'm just glad I had you, Mom," she would say with a maturity beyond her years. "You were the only one who really knew what was important, family, not bloodlines." Her words simultaneously filled me with pride and profound sadness for the innocence she was forced to let wither at such a young age. But I took solace in knowing I had insulated her from the brunt of their viciousness. Until the day that seismic postscript arrived, brutally textured with karma's fury. It was a simple certified letter that appeared innocuous at first glance. But the return address, a maximum security prison, quickly turned my blood cold. With hands trembling, I tore it open to find a terse, stark message. "Mrs. Redding, I regret to inform you that your former husband, Evan Redding, has been incarcerated on charges of corporate racketeering, embezzlement, and tax evasion related to his business activities." The legalese continued, but my vision blurred as the full weight landed. Evan was going to prison for upwards of a decade, his career and reputation utterly immolated in the wake of those charges, just like I had threatened all those years ago with my hidden evidence, a thermonuclear strike I'd hoped would never truly be detonated. Clearly, authorities had dug deeper in the aftermath of our brutal divorce and uncovered the full crater of his financial chicanery. The sick twist of satisfaction I felt soured in an instant, replaced by a mix of stunned dismay and something worse, something deeper. Remorse and empathy I didn't want to feel for that wretched man. Because no matter how unforgivable his actions, no matter how much he deserved punishment, I knew this development would utterly shatter Marla. Her whole world, her whole cancerous obsession for continuing the family empire through a male heir, would finally collapse in on itself with Evan incarcerated. She would be alone, bereft, her manipulative power machinations reduced to ashes at last. I tried to stamp out the small tendril of compassion worming through me, reminding myself of her boundless cruelty, her eagerness to obliterate my own family. Yet it persisted, the ghost of the hopeful young bride I had once been, sickened by the realization that Marla had doomed herself and her deepest desire through her very quest to obtain it. Her worldview had been her undoing. The ramifications, of course, would ripple out in unpredictable waves. What would become of their real estate empire and wealth with Evan behind bars? And more urgently, what about Zoe? I was deep in thought, rereading the letter for any clues, when the front door opened and my now-grown daughter swept in from classes. "Hi, Mom. Did you hear from—" She stopped short, taking in my pale, shaken expression. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" Drawing a steadying breath, I wordlessly handed her the letter. Zoe's eyes rapidly scanned the contents, her brows shooting upward in disbelief. "Oh my God, Dad's in prison?" She looked up at me, the shock and hurt palpable despite our long estrangement from Evan. I moved to pull her into a comforting embrace, stroking her hair just like when she was little. "I know, honey, I know. It's a lot to process." She held me tightly for a long moment, and I could sense her whirling thoughts settling like sediment through cloudy waters. Finally, she pulled back, eyes resolute and voice steady. This doesn't change anything for us, Mom. His mistakes, his crimes, that's on him. We've built a good life beyond his mistakes and grandmother's madness. Zoe squeezed my hands firmly, her warm smile crackling with that resilient spirit inherited from her mother's DNA. Maybe this can be the end of it all, a fresh start, free from his shadow and her poison for good. I gazed at her with swelling pride and love, overcome by the wise perseverance blazing in her youthful eyes. She was right. As the monolithic shockwave propagated outward, Evan behind bars, Marla's world crumbling, we stood together on solid ground, free and unshaken. Perhaps this was the final cosmic realignment, setting the scales permanently even. Pulling my brave, beautiful daughter close, I felt the manacles of that dark family history begin to shed like snakeskin at last. Evan and Marla had bet everything on lies and power lust, unwittingly burrowing their shared grave. But in their defeat, in their self-ruination, I had conquered. My quiet resilience, my bond of love with Zoe had won the generational war. My only lingering words as their entitled kingdom crumbled to dust were the same ones I had snarled at Marla so many years ago. Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, because this time, it would be permanent. The echo of Marina's whispered words sent a chill down my spine. I stood frozen, clutching the laundry basket, as her hushed conversation wafted through the open door of the guest house. Something about the tone and urgency of her voice raised every red flag within me. I know, but I need more time, she pleaded. Her voice strained. Just a few more weeks, and I swear I'll have the money. My heart raced as I realized she was talking to a man who was not my son, Adrian. A familiar knot of unease twisted in my gut. Marina's erratic behavior and constant need for cash had become a source of concern, but this conversation hinted at something more sinister. Footsteps approached, and I quickly retreated, my mind whirling with unanswered questions. As Marina emerged, her expression was one of barely contained panic. She jumped when she noticed me, her eyes wide with what looked like guilt. "Delilah, I didn't see you there," she stammered, her hand clutching her phone tightly. "Everything okay, dear?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Yes, of course," she replied with a forced smile. "Just a call about work." Work? Marina hadn't held a job in years, not since Lila was born. The lie was transparent, and it only deepened my suspicions. Over dinner that evening, Adrian and Hank remained oblivious to the tension simmering between Marina and me. Lila, our sweet 7-year-old granddaughter, chattered away, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents rippling beneath the surface. As the meal progressed, I couldn't help but study Marina's behavior. The way she fidgeted, her eyes darting around the room, the forced smiles that never quite reached her eyes. It was as if she carried a heavy burden, one she was desperate to conceal. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, I found myself pacing the living room, unable to shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Marina's cryptic conversation replayed in my mind, each word amplifying the disquiet that had taken root. Hank emerged from our bedroom, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on, Delilah? You've been on edge all evening." I hesitated, unsure of how to voice my suspicions without sounding paranoid. But Hank's patient gaze encouraged me to open up. "It's Marina," I confessed, wringing my hands. "I overheard her on the phone earlier, and it sounded like she's in some kind of trouble, financial trouble, perhaps. She was pleading with someone for more time, promising to pay them back." Hank's expression grew grave as he absorbed my words. "Are you certain?" I nodded, recounting the details of the conversation I'd overheard. As the words tumbled out, I could see the weight of my concerns settling upon Hank's shoulders. "We need to tread carefully," he said, his voice heavy with caution. "Accusations without proof could do irreparable damage to this family." His words struck a chord, and I knew he was right, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Marina was hiding something that threatened the very fabric of our family's well-being. As I lay awake that night, my mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. One thing was certain: I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. The truth had to be uncovered, even if it meant shattering the fragile peace we had so carefully cultivated. In the days that followed, a palpable tension lingered in our home. I found myself constantly on edge, scrutinizing Marina's every move, searching for any clues that might shed light on her mysterious behavior. The truth was, I distrusted her. A realization that filled me with guilt, but one I couldn't ignore. It started with small things, a missing piece of jewelry, a few dollars gone from my purse. Insignificant incidents, perhaps, but they felt like threads in a larger tapestry of deceit. Marina's excuses rang hollow, her explanations riddled with holes that only deepened my suspicions. I must have misplaced it, she'd say, waving away my concerns with a casual shrug. But the glint in her eyes betrayed her nonchalance, hinting at something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Then came the larger transgressions, the ones that couldn't be easily dismissed. Unexplained withdrawals from our joint bank account, purchases of expensive clothing and accessories that seemed far beyond her means. Marina's once frugal ways had given way to a newfound taste for luxury, and I couldn't help but wonder where the money was coming from. "It's just a little treat for myself," she'd insist, flashing a dazzling smile that did little to mask the calculating gleam in her eyes. Hank tried to reason with me, urging caution and patience. "We can't make accusations without proof," he'd remind me, his voice laced with concern. But I couldn't shake the gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong, and Marina was at the center of it all. It was during one of our hushed conversations that a plan began to take shape. A way to catch Marina in the act, to unravel the web of deception she'd so carefully woven. With Hank's reluctant approval, I began marking the bills in our cash box, a silent trap waiting to be sprung. The days ticked by, each one more tense than the last. Marina's behavior grew increasingly erratic, her absences more frequent and her excuses more flimsy. It was as if she knew the walls were closing in, and she was scrambling to maintain her facade of normalcy. Then, one fateful afternoon, I caught her red-handed. I'd returned home unexpectedly, only to find Marina rifling through my dresser drawers. Her eyes went wide with panic when she saw me, and she instinctively tried to hide the bundle of marked bills clutched in her trembling hand. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Marina's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits of defiance. "You have no right to accuse me," she spat, her words laced with venom. "You're just a paranoid old woman, grasping at shadows." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. "Those are my bills, Marina, the ones I marked specifically to catch you in the act." For a moment, she faltered, her mask of indignation slipping. But then, just as quickly, it snapped back into place, and she unleashed a torrent of denials and accusations, painting me as the villain in her twisted narrative. Hank rushed in, alerted by the commotion, and tried to play peacemaker. But Marina would have none of it, storming out and leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. As I watched her retreating figure, a sense of grim determination settled over me. The game was up, the truth laid bare. Marina's betrayal had been exposed, and now the real battle was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as we all gathered in the living room. Marina sat rigidly on the couch, her arms crossed defensively, while Adrian paced back and forth, his expression etched with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "This is absurd," Marina spat, her eyes flashing with defiance. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" I steeled myself, clutching the bundle of marked bills like a lifeline. "These are the same bills I marked, Marina. I found them in your possession, hidden in my dresser drawer." Adrian's head whipped around, his gaze shifting between us like a pendulum. "What's going on?" "Someone needs to explain this to me right now." Hank placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, his silent support bolstering my resolve. "We caught Marina stealing from us. Son, she's been taking money, jewelry, anything she could get her hands on." Marina recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her expression contorting into one of outrage. "How dare you? You're both delusional, grasping at straws to suit your twisted little narrative." "We have proof, Marina," I said, my voice firm. "These marked bills are all the evidence we need." "That proves nothing," she snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're just looking for an excuse to turn Adrian against me." Adrian flinched, his face pale with shock. "Marina, please, tell me this isn't true." For a moment Marina faltered, her mask of defiance slipping ever so slightly. But then, just as quickly, she rallied, turning her venomous gaze on her husband. "Of course it's not true, darling." she cooed, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. Your mother has become unhinged in her old age. She's seeing things that aren't there, twisting innocent actions into some grand conspiracy. My heart sank as Adrian's eyes clouded with doubt. Marina had played her trump card, exploiting the unbreakable bond between mother and son. Mom, I don't know what to believe, Adrian stammered, his eyes pleading with me to retract my accusations. Before I could respond, Marina pounced, her words slicing through the air like daggers. Your mother has always resented me, Adrian. She's never accepted me into this family, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us. Tears of frustration stung my eyes as I watched Marina's manipulation take hold. She was a master of deception, weaving her lies with surgical precision, playing on Adrian's love and loyalty like a virtuoso. That's not true, I protested, my voice cracking with emotion. I'm only trying to protect this family from her deceit. Adrian shook his head, his expression clouded with a mixture of hurt and confusion. I don't know what to believe anymore. Marina seized the opportunity, wrapping her arms around him in a gesture of false comfort. It's okay, my love. We'll get through this, just like we always do. As I watched them embrace, the bitter taste of defeat filled my mouth. Marina had won this round, her lies and manipulations carrying the day. But deep within me, an ember of determination still burned, fueled by the knowledge that the truth was on my side. This was far from over. In the aftermath of Marina's blatant lies and Adrian's misguided loyalty, a palpable rift had formed within our family. The once warm and inviting atmosphere had given way to a chilling tension, each of us trapped in our own emotional turmoil. Marina strutted around the house with a smug air of victory, her every action a silent taunt, a reminder of the wedge she'd driven between us. Her deceit had taken root, casting doubt and suspicion like a noxious cloud that threatened to consume us all. Hank, bless his heart, tried his best to remain the voice of reason. We need concrete evidence, he'd say, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination, something that can't be twisted or denied. His words struck a chord within me, reigniting the flames of my resolve. If Marina wanted a war, then a war she would have. I would not rest until the truth was laid bare, no matter the cost. With Hank's reluctant approval, I took the first step in my quest for vindication, installing hidden cameras throughout the house. It felt like a violation of trust, but Marina's betrayal had left me with little choice. Day after day, I pored over the footage, documenting every suspicious movement, every whispered conversation, every unexplained absence. Each new piece of evidence was like a puzzle piece, slowly revealing the bigger picture of Marina's deceit. I became a prisoner in my own home, haunted by the ghosts of Marina's lies. Sleep evaded me, my nights consumed by the flickering images on the monitor, searching for that one damning moment that would unravel her carefully constructed web of deception. Marina, oblivious to my covert surveillance, grew bolder in her actions. Her spending spiraled out of control, designer handbags and expensive jewelry adorning her like trophies of her conquest. And all the while she played the part of the doting wife and mother, her lies growing more elaborate with each passing day. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I found an unlikely ally in my quest for the truth. An old friend from my nursing days, a former police officer named Cynthia, had reached out after sensing my distress. Over cups of strong coffee and whispered confidences, I poured out the sordid details of Marina's betrayal, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Cynthia listened intently, her eyes filled with a combination of sympathy and steely determination. You need to document everything, she urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. Every lie, every unexplained expense, every suspicious action. Build an airtight case that even Adrian can't ignore. Her words ignited a newfound sense of purpose within me. I would become a one-woman investigation team, leaving no stone unturned in my quest to expose Marina's duplicity. With Cynthia's guidance, I began meticulous documentation, cross-referencing bank statements, receipts, and eyewitness accounts. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the fortress I was building, a bastion of truth that would withstand even Marina's most vicious assaults. As the days turned into weeks, the strain of my double life began to take its toll. Marina's barbed comments and dismissive glances cut deeper with each passing day, reminding me of the precarious position I found myself in. But through it all, Cynthia remained my unwavering rock, a beacon of support in the storm of Marina's lies. Her friendship became a lifeline, sustaining me through the darkest moments when doubt threatened to consume me. Little did Marina know, the walls were closing in. The truth was a relentless hunter, and I was its unyielding pursuer. Her reign of deception was nearing its end, and soon she would face the consequences of her actions. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of our family, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. As the days ticked by, the strain of my covert investigation began to take its toll. Sleep became a fleeting luxury, replaced by endless hours spent hunched over the monitor, scouring the footage for any shred of evidence that could unravel Marina's web of lies. Cynthia became my lifeline, her steadfast support and unwavering belief in my cause the only thing keeping me afloat. Our meetings grew more frequent, our conversations a safe haven where I could voice my fears and frustrations without judgment. "She's unraveling, Cynthia," I confided one evening, my voice laced with exhaustion. "The more evidence I gather, the more reckless she becomes." Cynthia nodded grimly, her eyes reflecting a grim understanding. "Cornered animals are often the most dangerous. Marina knows the walls are closing in, and she's lashing out in desperation." Her words rang true. Marina's behavior had become increasingly erratic, her lies more brazen, and her actions more reckless. It was as if she believed she had already won, that her manipulation of Adrian had granted her immunity from consequence. "She's spending like there's no tomorrow," I lamented, rifling through a stack of bank statements. "Expensive jewelry, designer clothes, lavish outings. It's like she's flaunting her ill-gotten gains right in front of us." Cynthia's brow furrowed as she studied the documentation I had meticulously compiled. "She's overconfident, sloppy. That's good for us. It means she's making mistakes." I nodded, my jaw clenched with determination, "and I'll be there to catch every single one of them." With each passing day, the rift within our family grew wider, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Adrian remained steadfastly loyal to Marina, dismissing my concerns as unfounded paranoia fueled by resentment. "Mom, you need to let this go," he pleaded, his eyes filled with a mixture of exasperation and concern. "Marina loves us, and your constant accusations are tearing this family apart." His words cut deep, but I refused to back down. "I'm only trying to protect us, Adrian. Can't you see what she's doing?" Marina would swoop in during these moments, playing the role of the devoted wife to perfection. "Your mother is blinded by her irrational hatred for me," she cooed, her eyes brimming with false tears. "She's become consumed by this vendetta, and it's poisoning her mind." Adrian would pull her close, casting reproachful glances in my direction as he comforted his wife, the woman I knew to be a master manipulator. These scenes played out with increasing frequency, each one chipping away at my resolve. But Cynthia's unwavering support kept me grounded, her friendship a lifeline in the storm of Marina's deceit. "Don't let her get to you," Cynthia urged, her voice firm but laced with compassion. "She's playing mind games, trying to break your spirit. But you're stronger than that, Delilah. You have the truth on your side." Her words reignited the flame of determination within me. I would not be deterred, not by Marina's lies or her emotional manipulation. The truth was my shield, and I would wield it like a sword, cutting through the tangled web of deception that had ensnared my family. As the evidence mounted, so too did the weight of the burden I carried. Sleep became elusive, replaced by fitful slumbers haunted by Marina's betrayal. But I refused to falter, driven by a singular purpose, to expose the truth and restore the sanctity of our family. Little did Marina know, her reign of deception was nearing its end. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, a reckoning that would shake the foundations of our lives, and this time there would be no escape from the harsh light of truth. The air was thick with tension as we gathered around the dining table for our weekly family dinner. Marina, ever the master of deception, wore a mask of serene domesticity, busying herself with serving platters and making small talk as if nothing were amiss. Adrian, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, chatted amiably about his work, his eyes filled with a love and devotion that made my heart ache. How could he not see the monster he had welcomed into our home, into our lives? Hank shot me a sidelong glance, his expression a silent plea for restraint. But the time for patience had passed. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered was irrefutable, and I could no longer stand idly by as Marina's lies poisoned our family. As Marina placed the final dish on the table, I cleared my throat, the sound cutting through the forced conviviality like a knife. Before we begin, there's something we need to address. Marina's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the shift in the atmosphere. What is it, Delilah? I leveled my gaze at her, steeling myself for the battle to come. I know what you've been doing, Marina. The stealing, the lies, the secret meetings. I have proof of all of it. A hush fell over the table as Adrian and Hank exchanged bewildered glances. Marina, for her part, maintained her facade of innocence, a sickly sweet smile curling her lips. I don't know what you're talking about, she demurred, her voice dripping with false sincerity. These accusations are baseless and hurtful. Enough with the lies, I snapped, my patience finally fraying. I have footage of you rifling through our belongings, taking money and valuables. I have documentation of your secret rendezvous and unexplained expenditures. Marina's mask slipped, her expression contorting into one of barely contained fury. You've been spying on me? In my own home? Our home, corrected, my voice firm. The home you've been systematically robbing and betraying with your deceit. Adrian's eyes widened, his gaze flickering between us as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Marina, is this true? Marina turned towards him, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. Of course not, my love. Your mother has become unhinged, consumed by her irrational hatred for me. Don't listen to her lies, Adrian, I pleaded, my voice thick with emotion. I have proof, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. With trembling hands I produced the damning footage, the grainy images flickering to life on the small screen. Marina's face drained of color as she watched herself slinking through the house, pocketing valuables and sneaking out at odd hours. Adrian recoiled as if he'd been struck, his eyes boring into the incriminating evidence with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Marina, how could you? Marina's composure cracked, her mask of innocence shattering like fragile glass. You stupid, meddling old woman, she spat, her words laced with venom. You've ruined everything. In that moment, the veneer of civility fell away, revealing the true depths of Marina's depravity. She launched into a tirade of accusations and denials, her voice rising to a fever pitch as she lashed out like a cornered animal. Adrian simply sat there, stunned into silence, his world crumbling around him. Hank tried to intervene, his voice a calming balm in the midst of the storm. Marina, please, let's all take a deep breath and— No, she snarled, her eyes wild with fury. I'm done playing by your rules, done with all of your lies and manipulations. With a violent sweep of her arm, she sent the dishes crashing to the floor, shattering porcelain and scattering food in a chaotic mess. Lila, our sweet granddaughter, let out a terrified wail, her eyes wide with fear. In that moment, something shifted within Marina. Her expression hardened, her lips curling into a sneer of pure contempt. You want the truth, Delilah? Fine. The truth is, I've been bleeding this family dry for months, and none of you were smart enough to catch on. The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, their impact rendering us all speechless. Marina had finally shown her true colors, and the sight was as horrifying as it was vindicating. As she stormed out, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I had hoped that our family could heal, that we could rebuild from the ashes of Marina's betrayal and emerge stronger, united by the bonds of love and loyalty. The war was won, but the scars would linger. And as I held Lila close, shielding her from the fallout, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, I would protect my family with every fiber of my being. The truth had set us free, but at what cost? The silence that followed Marina's explosive outburst was deafening, a palpable weight that seemed to press down upon us all. Adrian sat motionless, his face ashen, his eyes fixed on the space where his wife had stood moments earlier, hurling her venomous words like daggers. Hank was the first to break the spell, his voice low and measured. Son, I'm so sorry. We tried to warn you, but— Adrian held up a trembling hand, silencing his father. Don't. Just Don't. I watched helplessly as my son's world crumbled around him, the foundations of his life stripped bare by the harsh light of truth. Marina's betrayal had cut him to the core, and I ached to offer him comfort, to soothe the wounds inflicted by the woman he had loved and trusted. But before I could speak, the door creaked open, and Marina slunk back into the room, her eyes red-rimmed and her shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a weary resignation that hung like a shroud around her slight frame. "Adrian," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I owe you an explanation." Adrian stiffened, his jaw clenched, but he remained silent, granting her the opportunity to speak. Marina took a shuddering breath, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It started innocently enough, a few dollars here and there, just to feed my habit." My brow furrowed as the pieces began to fall into place. "Habit? What are you talking about?" Marina's gaze flickered to me, her eyes haunted. "Gambling. I have a problem, one that spiraled out of control." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the truth finally came to light. Marina, the woman we had welcomed into our family, the mother of our precious granddaughter, was a gambling addict, and she had been systematically bleeding us dry to fuel her addiction. "How could you?" Adrian's voice was a hoarse whisper, laced with heartbreak and disbelief. "How could you betray us like this?" Marina flinched as if struck, her eyes brimming with remorseful tears. "It started small, just a few dollars here and there to scratch the itch. But then the losses mounted, and I found myself digging a deeper and deeper hole, desperate to chase that high, to win it all back." Her words hung in the air, their weight suffocating. I thought back to all the signs, the unexplained expenditures, the missing valuables, all the breadcrumbs leading to this sordid truth. "And Lila?" Hank's voice was tight, his expression inscrutable. "Did you involve our granddaughter in your schemes?" Marina's head bowed in shame, her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. I did. I manipulated her, promised her lavish gifts if she helped me take a few things here and there." A collective gasp of horror echoed through the room, and I felt my heart constrict with a pain so acute it stole my breath away. Marina had not only betrayed our trust, but had also corrupted the innocence of our sweet Lila, using her as a pawn in her twisted game. Adrian shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "Get out!" he growled, his voice thick with barely contained fury. "Get out of my house and never come back." Marina opened her mouth as if to protest, but one look at Adrian's thunderous expression seemed to quell any further objections. With a defeated nod, she rose to her feet and made her way towards the door, each step heavy with the weight of her sins. As she reached the threshold, she turned back, her eyes pleading. "Adrian, please, let me see Lila. I'll get help, I promise. Just don't take her away from me." But Adrian's resolve was unshakable, his love for his wife eclipsed by the depths of her betrayal. "You lost that right the moment you involved our daughter in your schemes. I'll be filing for full custody first thing in the morning." Marina's face crumpled, but she offered no further resistance. With a broken sob, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving a trail of shattered lives in her wake. As the door closed behind her, a heavy silence descended upon the room, punctuated only by the muffled sound of Lila's whimpers from the next room. In that moment, the weight of Marina's deceit crashed down upon us all, a tsunami of grief and anger that threatened to consume us whole. But even as the tides of emotion surged, I felt a glimmer of hope flicker to life within me. The truth, no matter how painful, had been laid bare, and from these ashes we would rebuild, one step at a time, one day at a time, until the wounds had healed and the scars had faded. It would be a long and arduous journey, but we would walk it together, as a family united by our love and our resilience. Marina's betrayal would not define us, it would be the catalyst for our rebirth, a crucible from which we would emerge stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. As I reached out to gather Adrian and Lila into my embrace, I silently vowed that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, fortified by the unbreakable bonds of family and the healing power of truth. The days that followed Marina's explosive confession were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Adrian, steadfast in his resolve, wasted no time in filing for divorce and seeking full custody of Lila. "She doesn't get to slither back into our lives after what she's done," he declared, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Not until she's paid her debt to society and proven herself worthy of being a part of Lila's life again. As much as it pained me to see my son suffering, I couldn't help but swell with pride at the unwavering strength he displayed in the face of such devastating betrayal. Marina's deceit had cut him to the core, but instead of crumbling, he had risen like a phoenix from the ashes, driven by an unshakable determination to protect his daughter. The legal process was arduous, fraught with contentious hearings and bitter confrontations. Marina, perhaps sensing the gravity of her transgressions, offered little resistance, her once defiant spirit broken by the weight of her lies. In the end, justice prevailed. Marina was ordered to not only repay the staggering sum of money she had stolen from our family, but also to undergo a court-mandated rehabilitation program to address her gambling addiction. As for Lila, the judge granted Adrian full custody, with Marina receiving strictly supervised visitation rights, a harsh but necessary measure to ensure our granddaughter's well-being in the aftermath of her mother's deplorable actions. "She'll have the chance to rebuild her relationship with Lila," Adrian told me, his eyes shining with a mixture of resolution and cautious hope. "But only if she proves herself worthy of that privilege." Marina's sentencing was a bittersweet moment, a culmination of months of anguish and turmoil. As she stood before the judge, her shoulders slumped in defeat, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity amid the overwhelming sense of vindication. This woman, who had once been welcomed into our family with open arms, had fallen so far, consumed by the demons of her own making. Her descent into depravity had not only cost her our trust, but had also robbed her of the love and respect of her own daughter. As the gavel fell, sealing her fate, I saw a flicker of remorse in Marina's eyes. A fleeting glimpse of the person she might have been, untainted by the insidious grip of addiction. In that moment, I realized that true revenge lay not in her suffering but in our perseverance, our unwavering commitment to healing the wounds she had inflicted upon our family. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but we were ready to face it head-on, bolstered by the unbreakable bonds that had been forged in the crucible of Marina's betrayal. Hank and I became a constant presence in Adrian and Lila's lives, offering unwavering support and stability in the wake of their upheaval. Slowly but surely, we began to piece together the fragments of our fractured family, building anew on the foundations of love, trust, and resilience. Lila, bless her heart, proved to be our greatest source of strength and hope. Her innocent spirit, untainted by the darkness of her mother's actions, was a beacon that guided us through the darkest of times. "Why did Mommy do those bad things?" she would ask, her eyes wide and imploring. And in those moments, we would gather her close, assuring her that while her mother had made grave mistakes, she still loved her. A love that would have to be earned anew through painstaking effort and unwavering commitment. As the months passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars would forever serve as a reminder of the price we had paid for the truth. Marina, to her credit, seemed to embrace her court-mandated rehabilitation, her visits with Lila becoming less strained and more genuine with each passing week. It was during one such visit, as I watched Marina and Layla engage in a tentative yet tender exchange, that I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The anger and resentment that had once consumed me had given way to a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the resilience of my family, for the strength we had found in adversity, and for the unbreakable bonds that had carried us through the storm. As Marina bid farewell to Lila, her eyes shone with a newfound clarity, a glimmer of the woman she had once been, untainted by the darkness that had nearly consumed her. In that moment, I realized that true victory lay not in her suffering, but in our ability to rise above it, to emerge from the ashes of her betrayal stronger, wiser, and more tightly bound than ever before. The road ahead would undoubtedly be paved with challenges, but we were ready to face them head-on, fortified by the unwavering love and support that had seen us through our darkest hours. As I watched Adrian and Lila laugh and play in the warm embrace of our family, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The truth had set us free, but it had also revealed the depths of our resilience and the unbreakable bonds that truly defined us. We were survivors, warriors forged in the fires of adversity, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever dim the light that burned within our hearts. The video message from my daughter-in-law, Lena, landed like a slap to the face. There she was on the screen, perfectly made up, her blonde hair cascading over designer clothing, a fake smile plastered on her lips. "Hi, Marlene, Theo," she began in that sickly sweet tone. "I'm reaching out about Aiden's 5th birthday bash next month. It's a major milestone, so we want to make it extra special." Here it comes, I thought, exchanging a wary glance with Theo. Ever since Elliot married this Instagram beauty queen, her demands on us had only grown. "A little birdie told me you two were looking to get Aiden something amazing for his big day." Lena batted her fake eyelashes. "Well, I'm making it easy. Aiden would absolutely love a brand new swimming pool installed in our backyard." My jaw dropped. A pool? Those ran tens of thousands of dollars, even for a basic model. Nothing too fancy. Lena continued with a dismissive hair toss. "Just your standard issue resort-style in-ground pool with a pool house, hot tub, the whole 9 yards. You know how much Aiden loves swimming." She droned on with more details of her extravagant vision, but I'd stopped listening. This was absurd. After years of her entitled behavior, this felt like the final straw. "So let me know if you need any other details. But really, make it worthwhile or don't even bother showing up." Lena flashed one last grin before the video cut out. The silence hung heavy between Theo and me. "She can't be serious," I finally sputtered. Theo sighed, squeezing the bridge of his nose. "When is she not?" You know how Lena gets. I did know. Ever since Elliot brought this artificially sweet high-maintenance woman into our lives, she'd made increasingly outrageous demands under the guise of making memories for our grandson Aiden. Expensive Disney cruises, designer clothes, even a celebrity kiddie party planner for his 4th birthday bash. And Lena always spun it as being for Aiden, but anyone could see the real priority was herself and her influencer image. But this took things to another level. A fully decked-out pool just for a kid's birthday? It was obscene. "We can't," I said flatly. "Theo, we don't have that kind of money. Even if we scraped everything we had, there's no way." Tears pricked my eyes, a mix of anger, hurt and exasperation churning inside me. This was our family she was talking about, not one of her online audiences to impress. I could see the same emotions etched on Theo's face as he pulled me into a hug. For a long moment, we clung to each other, united against Lena's audacious demand. But Theo eventually pulled back, resignation in his eyes. Maybe we could look into something smaller," he said tentatively. "We both have been putting in extra hours at work, and there's my pension fund that'll be available soon." I stared at him, stunned he'd even entertained such lunacy. "You're not seriously considering this?" He shrugged helplessly. "It's for our grandson, Marlene. If doing this might help get Lena off our backs, keep Elliot and Aiden in our lives." His words trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken meaning loud and clear. If giving Lena what she demanded was the price for preserving our family, for keeping Elliot and Aiden from being completely poisoned by her distorted values. Reopening the wound she just inflicted, Lena's parting words echoed in my mind. "Make it worthwhile, or don't bother showing up." My heart ached at the thought of being cut off from my only grandchild over this, but I also couldn't fathom bankrupting ourselves for one of Lena's tantrums. Squaring my shoulders, I met Theo's worried gaze. No matter what it took, I wouldn't let this woman fracture our family. We had to find a way to make this right. The days blurred together after that bombshell from Lena. Every conversation, every interaction seemed to circle back to her outrageous pool demand. "We could put a home equity loan on the house," Theo mused one night over dinner, "just to cover the upfront costs." I nearly choked on my food. "Are you insane? Go into debt over this? We're not made of money." He wilted under my glare. "I'm just trying to think of options, honey. You know how Lena gets when she doesn't get her way." I slammed my fork down with more force than intended. "So what? We just roll over for her every tantrum? Where does it end?" The haunted look in Theo's eyes said it all. We both knew there was no endpoint with Lena, not unless one of us put our foot down. Still, the threat of being cut off from Elliot and Aiden loomed over us like a curse. In a way, that's exactly what Lena had become, a curse upon our family. The demands only escalated from there. Suddenly she was calling constantly, texting incessant updates about party planning she needed our input on. Her reasoning didn't even make sense half the time. She just wanted to soak up our energy and resources. One afternoon, I arrived home from the library to find Theo elbow-deep in sketches and spreadsheets. "What's all this?" I asked in bewilderment. "Lena stopped by with one of her vision boards," he sighed, looking 20 years older. "She had it all mapped out, the pool, the landscaping, even a pool house with its own kitchen and bar." "You're kidding." I sank onto the couch, anger roiling in my gut. "She brought this insanity into our home?" "She said this is the only way Aiden will be happy." Theo raked a hand through his thinning hair warily. "That we're depriving him if we don't make his dream come true." My jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. "That's a bunch of crap. This is about her, not Aiden." I know. Theo turned back to the coffee table of binders and portfolios, misery etched in the slump of his shoulders. "But maybe if we put in some reasonable requests, she'll settle for less. Or maybe she'll keep demanding more." I threw up my hands in frustration. Since when did we start going broke for that woman's ego? The shrill ring of Theo's phone cut off his reply. Lena's smiling face flashing on the screen, he shot me an apologetic look and answered, jaw tensing as she launched into another tirade. I watched him nod along like a beaten dog, offering feeble uh-huhs and "we'll sees" in response to her endless stream of wants. When he finally hung up 20 minutes later, I could no longer hold back my fury. "I'm drawing the line, Theo. This is utter madness." Sagging back against the sofa, he looked utterly defeated. "She threatened not to let us see Aiden if we don't give in, Marlene. What are we supposed to do?" My heart twisted at the mere thought of losing our grandson, of Aiden being shaped and twisted by that woman's distorted values, without our stabilizing presence to guide him. It was a waking nightmare. But I also knew we couldn't keep indulging Lena's deranged spending and entitlement complex. It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Someone had to put their foot down, even if it meant confronting the worst possible outcome. Meeting Theo's haunted gaze, I drew a steadying breath. We need a plan. One that finally puts this madness to bed, without losing our family over it. His eyes widened briefly, then narrowed to cold steel. At last, we were on the same page. No more being manipulated, no more cowering to Lena's histrionics. For the sake of our grandchild, the kid glove treatment was officially over. Aiden's 5th birthday party was every bit the overblown spectacle Lena had threatened. Dozens of shrieking kids swarmed the backyard she'd decked out like a carnival midway. Balloon arches, a massive bounce house, even a live petting zoo dominated our modest suburban yard. "Can you believe this madness?" I muttered to Theo as we wove through the chaos, searching for our grandson. He grimaced, eyes bouncing from the whirring rides to the team of princessed-up party performers putting on a show. "Try not to let it get to you today. We're here for Aiden, remember?" Easy for him to say. My teeth ground with each new display of excess I took in. An entire hide worth of party food piled onto tables, an electric train ride blaring its caller through the neighborhood. All for one little boy's birthday. But Lena was the true ringmaster of this 3-ring circus. She flitted through the crowd in a designer sundress that cost more than my monthly mortgage, greeting guests with air kisses and fake laughs. Her social media friend posed beside her for countless staged photo ops. When she finally deigned to notice us, her sugary smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, if it isn't the party poopers, so glad you two could join." I opened my mouth, every biting remark I'd rehearsed rising to my tongue. But Theo squeezed my hand in warning. "We're happy to be here for Aiden's big day," he replied tightly. Yes, about that." Lena's eyes flicked across the yard, sweeping dismissively over the chaos surrounding us. "I must admit, I'm a little disappointed. I thought you two loved your grandson enough to go all out." I bristled at her condescending tone, taking in the insanity all around us. "You're kidding me, right? This spectacle is enough for 10 birthdays. "Oh, honey, don't be so bourgeois." She patted my cheek in a way that made me want to slap it. "You know that's just how us influencers do things. Go big or go home, right?" The fake, tinkling laugh that followed made my blood boil. Bourgeois? She was the one blowing enough cash for a down payment on a house on this ridiculous circus. Where's the gift anyway? She tapped one designer heel impatiently. I gave you too ample time to make this a memorable bash for Aiden. The gift? Theo sputtered, shifting uncomfortably. We didn't get the chance to really... Don't tell me you punted on that too. Lena's face contorted into a sneer, drawing looks from nearby guests. See, this is exactly why I keep my expectations low for you two. So painfully pedestrian. That was the final straw. I jabbed a finger at the spectacle surrounding us, fury making me tremble. Are you out of your mind? Look at all this. How could you possibly need or want anything more? Ooh, someone's getting a little big for her britches. Lena ran her eyes over me with barely disguised contempt. I expected better than this pathetic display from my husband's parents. Truly disappointing. As her social circle began murmuring and leaning in, I saw red. The only disappointment here is you, using Aiden as an excuse to bankrupt us over this gaudy. Mommy? The small, timid voice caused the breath to catch in my throat. I turned to find Aiden himself standing there, party hat askew and confusion written on his cherubic features. What's going on? His wide eyes bounced between Lena and me. For a long, tense beat, the entire party seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for Lena's response. Then her features melted into an exaggerated pout, and she rushed to pull Aiden against her hip. Oh, sweetie, your mean old grandma's just upset she couldn't get you that new pool you wanted. Pool? The poor kid looked even more bewildered. Yes, for your birthday. Tears welled in Lena's eyes as she stroked his hair. But she and Grandpa are just being selfish old grumps about giving you your present. Aiden's gaze bounced between Lena and us, innocent incomprehension melting into dismay. The sight twisted my heart into knots. Lena, as always, had spun a web of lies to paint herself as the hapless victim. But I didn't want a pool, Aiden mumbled meekly. A hush fell over the entire yard as every eye turned toward Lena, awaiting her response. Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before she threw an arm around Aiden, sobbing dramatically. Of course you didn't, sweetie. She locked eyes with me over his head, that vindictive smile back in place. How could you want something so frivolous when you have such a thoughtful mom who's about to give you a baby sibling? My heart plummeted somewhere into my shoes. As a new flood of cries and gasps filled the yard, surrounding us in a swell of shock, Lena just stared at me in cold triumph. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The fallout from Aiden's disastrous birthday bash was swift and absolute. In the days and weeks after Lena's conniving pregnancy reveal, a palpable rift formed in our family. Elliot, ever the doting husband, rallied behind his devious wife without question. She's under a lot of stress and hormones right now, he protested whenever Theo or I tried reasoning with him. We need to be supportive. Supportive? After the humiliating spectacle she made of us in front of all those people, over her ludicrous lies about wanting a pool for Aiden, the mere thought made my blood boil. But Elliot simply waved off our concerns, too besotted to see Lena's true colors. Instead, the two of them retreated further into their social media bubble, posting a deluge of videos and photo ops about her radiant pregnancy journey. Meanwhile, our access to our actual grandson continued dwindling at Lena's behest. Every attempt at a visit or outing was rebuffed with another flimsy excuse about her difficult pregnancy and need for rest. I tried pushing back, calling Elliot out on our unfair treatment, but he only grew more defensive. Why can't you be happy for us? He snapped during one tense exchange after I insisted on having Aiden over for Theo's birthday. I threw up my hands in disgust. Of course we're happy you're having another child, but this goes far beyond that, and you know it. Elliot's jaw tightened mulishly. No, I don't know that. All I see are my parents acting jealous and bitter about our growing family. The hurtful accusation struck deep, rendering me momentarily speechless. How could my own son be so blind to the manipulation swirling around him? I stalked off before I said something I'd regret, fighting back angry tears. In the den, I found Theo watching the latest Lena video with a pained expression. Did you see this garbage? I scoffed, gesturing at the screen where Lena cooed about her pregnancy glow and upcoming nursery design. She's airing all our dirty laundry for clicks. Theo shook his head slowly. Not just that. Check out the comments. A quick skim revealed a distressing number of replies bashing us, calling us cruel and unsupportive. all based on the twisted story Lena was peddling about her humble family. Clicking off the video in disgust, I sank into the sofa beside Theo. I don't know how much more of this I can take. He draped a comforting arm around my shoulders, the wariness in his eyes mirroring my own. We knew there'd be backlash for standing up to Lena. She's not going to let this slide. So we're just supposed to sit back while she smears us in public? Cuts us off from our own grandchild over her petty schemes? Tears of frustration stung my eyes. Of course not, but we need to be smart about our next move. As if on cue, Theo's phone chimed with a new text notification. Something in his expression shifted as he read the message. "What is it?" I asked warily. He held the phone out, letting me read the message from an unknown number. Evidence against Lena. "Seeing you suffer kills me, but I can help. Attached are files on her real spending priorities. No need to thank me. I'll remain anonymous. Do what you must." My breath caught as I scrolled through the suspicious attachments. Bank statements detailing massive sums of money, photographs appearing to show Lena out partying and gallivanting while Aiden was off-screen. Could this be legitimate? "Who's this from?" I asked in a hushed voice, dread and a sliver of hope warring within me. Theo shook his head, lips set in a grim line. "No idea. But whoever they are, they just handed us the key to bringing Lena down once and for all." My heart stuttered at the thought, at finally being able to strike back at her manipulative lies and power plays. To save Aiden from her toxic influence, but to do so could risk severing our family ties for good. Elliot would surely take Lena's side, blinded by her false narratives. Theo must have seen the turmoil playing out on my face, because he squeezed my hand fiercely, leaning until our eyes met. "This may be our only chance, Marlene, our best shot at getting Aiden away from her poisonous influence, by any means necessary." The words hung heavy in the air, their implication clear. This was it, our point of no return that would alter the course of our family forever. No matter how it played out in the aftermath, we couldn't back down from this make-or-break moment, not if it meant protecting Aiden's future. With a shuddering exhale, I nodded to Theo. Time to stop walking on eggshells around Lena once and for all. Time to fight back. After the damning evidence from our anonymous source, Theo and I wasted no time springing into action against Lena. We began compiling every scrap of proof we could find, racking our brains for past incidents and manipulations she'd pulled over the years. With my background as a librarian, I focused on conducting meticulous online research, while Theo tapped his network of colleagues and parents at the high school for any whispers about Lena's unscrupulous behavior. No stone was left unturned in our quest to expose her web of lies. "Did you know the Hensons cut ties with Lena after their son's birthday party last year?" Theo told me one evening over coffee, eyes bright with vindication. I raised my eyebrows. "No, I didn't. What happened?" "Apparently she hosted this overblown princess bash for their daughter, then badmouthed them on social media for being cheap with their gift." Theo shook his head in disgust. "Jane said Lena has an entire hate folder on her phone, with screenshots of messages going back months." My blood boiled at the thought of more innocent families being dragged through the mud by that wretched snake. "I want copies of everything. We're blowing this whole farce wide open." Theo nodded grimly, determination etched into every line of his weathered face. For too long, we'd suffered in silence, taking Lena's abuse in misguided hopes of protecting our family. But now, armed with the truth and a growing arsenal of evidence, we were going to make her pay for her manipulation, one way or another. And I refused to let Aiden remain trapped in her toxic orbit any longer. The plan took shape over hushed discussions at our kitchen table, fueled by righteous indignation and the occasional glass of wine to steady our nerves. After raising our finances on tight budgets for so long, even the idea of striking back at Lena carried immense risk. But seeing the despicable way she'd used and discarded other families for her own gratification, her callous treatment of Aiden, it all hardened our resolve. This was about more than just settling a personal vendetta. "What if we started an anonymous website?" I proposed one night, tapping my pencil restlessly against my notepad. "A landing spot to release all the evidence to the public without directly confronting her." Theo frowned, rubbing his chin. "Isn't that a bit passive, though?" You know Lena, she'll just spin it as more hater attacks and bury the truth with her own propaganda blitz. Maybe? I worried my lip, then my eyes drifted to the teetering pile of manila folders brimming with damning documents. Or maybe we go straight to the source. He lifted one bushy eyebrow. You want to slip this all to Elliot? I shrugged, nerves fluttering in my belly. It's a risk, sure, but at this point, a direct intervention might be our only hope of finally breaking through to him and the truth. The thought of turning our own son against his wife, no matter how vile she'd proven to be, made my stomach churn. But I couldn't shake the memory of his haunted, oblivious expression at Aiden's party as Lena spun her web, too blinded by her manipulation to see the toxic reality. Releasing all our gathered evidence in one fell swoop, overwhelming him with proof of her true nature. It could be the wake-up call Elliot so desperately needed to escape her grasp. Theo sighed heavily, reaching across to squeeze my hand. It's a bold move, and if Elliot warns Lena first, then all bets are off, I finished quietly. We both knew that in Lena's hands the documents spelling out her misdeeds could vanish like smoke, smothered by her relentless spin and lies. Not to mention any fallout or vindictive vengeance she'd gleefully unleash on us all. But what other choice did we have? Sitting idly by had allowed her toxic web to spread unchecked this far. If we wanted any hope of saving Aiden from that poisonous environment, of protecting the rest of our family from her malice, we had to take one final, daring swing at the heart of her vile empire. Meeting Theo's steadfast gaze across the table, I saw the same conviction burning behind his eyes. No matter the risk, we couldn't let this insanity drag on any longer. Not while an innocent child's future hung in the balance. After all, that's what family was for, shielding our loved ones from those who wished to do them harm. And God help anyone who threatened a single hair on Aiden's head. With a grim nod, I reached for another file, and the planning began anew. One way or another, we'd bring Lena's house of lies crashing down around her, even if it meant raising our own family to the studs in the process. It was time. After weeks of meticulous planning and gathering evidence, Theo and I were ready to execute our gambit against Lena. The night before, we'd uploaded a comprehensive file dump to an anonymous web server, a digital dossier containing every scrap of proof we'd uncovered about Lena's neglect, manipulation, and wasteful spending. Incriminating bank statements, logged social media activity, even testimonies from others she'd mistreated over the years. All of it packaged together in one tidy bundle, waiting for our final keystrokes to release it upon the world. We planned to send the upload link directly to Elliot first, hoping the shock of the revelations would finally break whatever spell Lena had him under. But we also arranged for the files to automatically broadcast across multiple social platforms an hour later, ensuring widespread dispersal no matter how Lena tried to bury it. As the appointed hour ticked closer, my stomach twisted with nervous dread. This was it, our chance to protect Aiden and blow Lena's sham life apart for good. But the implications for the rest of our family... You ready for this? Theo's gruff voice pulled me from my whirling thoughts. He reached across the table to grasp my clammy hand, his own slightly trembling. We both knew there was no going back after this. I could only manage a tight nod, drawing a steadying breath. As I'll ever be. Theo's eyes crinkled at the corners with grim resignation. Then he turned toward the laptop between us. My heart kicked into overdrive as his finger hovered over the trackpad. For Aiden, he murmured. Our personal code for stealing our nerves these past few weeks. Another nod from me. For Aiden. And with that, he struck the upload key. Lena's exposure officially began. The file pinged to Elliot's inbox first, accompanied by a brief message. Open me, and you'll finally see the truth about your wife. I felt sick watching the progress bar crawl as the massive data dump transferred over. Every second dragged out like a Russian novel, each percentage increase seeming to taunt us with the damage we were about to unleash. How would Elliot react to this bombshell revelation about the woman he'd married? Would he immediately dismiss it as our bitter meddling? Or would the sheer enormity of evidence finally pierce whatever veil Lena had draped over his eyes? Most importantly, how vicious would Lena's retaliation be once she caught wind of our actions? A part of me was tempted to call the whole thing off, to snatch back this Pandora's box before its contents could contaminate our lives forever. But another insistent part, the one blazing with righteous fury over Lena's cruelty to Aiden, knew we'd finally crossed the Rubicon. There could be no half measures or surrender now, only scorched earth in the wake of our campaign. Suddenly, an alert box startled me from my daze. Transfer complete. The uploaded documents began ricocheting around the internet a second later, a widening digital diaspora every bit as uncontrollable as a raging bushfire. Within that first minute, a video compilation of Lena's greatest con hits began autoplaying on her own Instagram page, overlaying her palatial home videos with audio snippets of her vicious comments about Aiden and our family. Her comment sections, Twitter feeds, every social platform began melting down with a similar deluge of shocking evidence. Bank statements laid bare, archived posts and videos of her neglecting Aiden while living it up, personal messages mapping the intricate deceptions she'd spun. The bombardment was overwhelming, a digital tsunami crashing hard against the carefully curated facade she'd constructed over the years. And that was just the opening salvo in our counterstrike. Beside me, Theo let out a shuddering breath, half tension blowing off, half dawning realization of what we'd just set into motion. We watched the rapidly proliferating files ricochet across the web and across our community like a firestorm, the enormity of our actions finally striking home. Within the hour, news stations would pick up the story, then the national outlets and celebrity bloggers. And at the center would be our ground zero blast, a stark glimpse into the trauma and manipulation Lena had inflicted upon our family over these past years. It was finally too late to stop the shockwave. Our truth offensive had come for the house of Lena, and nothing would be left unscathed in its wake, not even our own family. The fallout from our cyber bombardment against Lena hit like a hurricane. Within hours, her immaculate online kingdom had been reduced to a smoking crater of shattered illusions and exposed lies. Social media ran rampant with screenshots, videos, and a gleeful dissection of every incriminating scrap of evidence we'd uncovered. Overnight, Lena went from influencer icon to radioactive pariah as her brands and sponsors began jumping ship in droves. As for me and Theo, we could only watch in a strange detachment as the firestorm raged, alternating between grim satisfaction and creeping dread over what this metamorphosis would mean for our family. We hadn't heard a peep from Elliot since uploading the files, leaving us to theorize in anxious silence over how deeply the revelations about his wife had shaken him. Would he emerge from the wreckage still defiantly loyal to Lena's lies? Or had our brutal truth offensive finally broken her spell over him? The answer came just after dawn, in a flurry of tense knocks at the door. Thank God. Theo exhaled in a ragged whisper when we saw Elliot's haggard face through the peephole. He ushered him inside, shooting me a worried glance. "Son, what's going on? We've been sick with—" The words died on his lips as Elliot staggered forward, eyes hollow and brimming with barely contained rage. I flinched, half expecting him to lash out at the source of this cataclysm. But then, with an anguished cry, he simply crumpled against Theo, shaking with suppressed sobs. Exchanging a wordless look with Theo, I moved to steady Elliot as he began to keen in harsh, gulping gasps, like a dam finally shattering deep within. "I'm sorry," he choked between ragged breaths. "God, I'm so sorry." My throat thickened at the sheer brokenness lacing his voice. After so many months of self-inflicted isolation at Lena's whim, seeing my own son return to us in such a state felt like a shard of ice piercing my heart. Eventually his sobs tapered enough for speech. "You were right about her. All this time you were right. Every vile thing she did to you, to Aiden." Another wave of anguish racked him, and he squeezed his eyes shut, burying his face in Theo's shoulder like a lost child. I exchanged a haunted look with my husband, words unspoken between us. We'd shattered her deceptions, yes, but at what cost to our son? Those messages, the videos. I can't believe I let it go on for so long. How I could be so blind. Hey, it's okay," Theo murmured gruffly, hands rubbing soothing circles on Elliot's back. "That's what she did, son. Manipulated you into her web, we get it." The harrowed look in his eyes said otherwise, that some part of us would never forgive ourselves for failing to extract Elliot sooner. But for now, Simply cradling our child against the aftermath seemed more important. When his ragged breathing finally evened out, Elliot pulled back, eyes rimmed and face haggard. "I kicked her out last night, took Aiden and left after seeing everything." He gestured vaguely, then seemed to deflate all over again. "God, how could I let Hervis get so twisted? To put Aiden through all that?" I bit back a scathing remark about putting a stop to her antics sooner. My anger could keep for another day. Right now, my son needed comfort and a safe harbor to process this traumatic reckoning, so I simply held his gaze and nodded, hoping he could read the understanding there, and the promise that her reign of terror was over. Elliot's shoulders slumped, weariness crashing over him as the last vestiges of life before crumbled away. Leaning into Theo again, he squeezed his eyes shut. "I don't know what I'd do without you both. After everything she put us through." The raw gratitude in his gravelly murmur was like a balm against all the suffering we'd endured this past year. Not that the road ahead would be easy. Lena would surely retaliate against this devastation in whatever ways she could. But in that moment, with our family united against her at long last, I felt a surge of defiance toward whatever vindictive storm still loomed ahead. She'd struck the first blows, set the rules of this scorched earth campaign. Now it was her turn to reap the whirlwind we'd sown. My eyes met Theo's over Elliot's bowed head. A silent vow passed between us, to ensure Lena never regained a foothold in our lives again. Not after this razing to the bedrock. Aiden's future and our family's well-being would remain secure, no matter how much we had to sacrifice to keep the she-wolf away. In the aftermath of our brutal takedown, the shockwaves rippled through every facet of our lives. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a sense of hope threaded through the upheaval. With Lena banished from our household, Elliot and Aiden took up semi-permanent residence in our spare bedroom as they worked to rebuild their lives from the wreckage she'd left behind. Watching my grandson set Phi into a routine free from her toxic influence was like a soothing balm after so much turmoil. Of course, Lena didn't slink off into oblivion quietly. Her initial defiance at the revelations morphed into a spiraling crusade of denials, threats, and attempts to regain control of the narrative. "She's claiming we fabricated everything," Elliot told us one night at the dinner table, jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "There's a new video saying we conspired against our own family out of jealousy." Theo grunted in disgust while I fought the urge to hurl my plate across the room. Even disgraced and dejected, that vile woman couldn't help lashing out like a cornered viper. "Let her squirm," I spat, locking eyes with my son. "The truth is finally out there, loud and clear for anyone who matters to see." "You're right." Some of the tension drained from Elliot's shoulders with an exhausted slump. In that moment, he seemed to age years in a matter of seconds. "Hell, it's all I can do not to put even more of her dirty laundry on blast right now." Despite the anger still simmering under his words, just having him back under our roof was like a weight lifted. Being able to see Aiden grow and play outside Lena's malign influence made every hardship worthwhile. Sure, she continued sniping and lobbing hateful allegations from her dwindling circle of sycophants. But without her manicured illusions to prop it up, the bluster rang increasingly hollow. While our family unit steadily regained its bearings and sense of purpose, the recharged bonds between Theo, me, and our boys were a constant through the transition. But nowhere was that bond more evident than in our renewed focus on Aiden's well-being. Having him around constantly, free from Lena's manipulation, revealed just how much she'd warped the sweet, innocent boy in her quest for notoriety. "Grandma, why didn't you like my party last time?" he asked me one sunny afternoon while blowing bubbles on the back patio. My gut twisted at the remembered humiliation. But when I glanced over at Aiden's cherubic features, so full of pure childhood curiosity, the truth came easily. "You know something, sweetheart? That whole big party, it wasn't really for you at all." I tickled his belly, earning a peal of giggles. "Your mommy just wanted to show off for her friends, not make you feel special." Aiden's tiny brow furrowed in confusion. "But I thought we were posed to have fun?" Leave it to the heartbreakingly earnest perspective of a child to cut straight through to the core truth. Smiling, I pulled him onto my lap and nuzzled his soft hair. "Of course we are, my little guy. And this time, I promise it's just going to be about us having fun together. No big fuss or showing off, okay? My throat thickened as I drank in his radiant smile. Because you're all the fun this old grandma needs. When his arms tightened around me in a fierce hug, I shot a look toward the patio door. Elliot and Theo were watching the tender scene, fondness and relief written across their faces. In that moment, with my family whole again and Lena's toxic presence banished, I felt as light and carefree as the bubbles drifting on the breeze, like awakening from a long, twisted nightmare finally behind us. Our war against Lena's malice had been brutal, with casualties strewn across both sides. But as I held my grandson close, savoring his unbridled joy, the battleground seemed a small price to pay. When Aiden's next milestone birthday arrived a few months later, we threw a small but rowdy bash in the backyard, a jumble of balloons, cheap pizza, and delighted shrieks as he tore through stack after stack of gifts showered on him by his adoring clan. No obscene overindulgences or camera crews, no vapid social media performances. Just the unconditional warmth and love of an extended family reveling in our reconnection. As I watched Theo gamely endure another round of the mechanized dancing robot Aiden had cajoled him into, my heart swelled with a sense of gratitude. For persevering through the darkest days and emerging victorious. For regaining the family I'd feared was lost forever to Lena's poisoned webs. Most of all, for ensuring my sweet grandson's bright future would remain unshackled by that vile woman's lust for attention at any cost. When Aiden came barreling over to demand another turn on the robot, Theo shot me a wink and an exaggerated grimace over the boy's head. A silent acknowledgement of how far we'd come to reclaim these simple family moments. Pulling them both close, I couldn't hide my radiant smile as the sounds of laughter and revelry swirled around us. Our family's new beginning had finally arrived.